In the USA, only about 10% of prison inmates are women. That's right, out of the 2 million incarcerated people in the USA, only 200,000 are women, and an even smaller amount of those women are serving a life sentence. But it does happen, some women do get locked up for life, and when they do, they can sometimes freak out. On this channel, we've already seen freakouts by male inmates and also teenage inmates. But now it's time to look at some women convicts having crazy reactions in court. I'm Charlie, and today we're going to look at female convicts who freaked out after getting a life sentence. Before we jump into it, why not subscribe and press the notification bell too. Diana Lovejoy. Most of the time when someone's having a court case over a serious crime, they know what the outcome's going to be. Their lawyer can usually predict it and let them prepare for the worst. But that is not what happened to this woman. When her life in prison guilty verdict was read out, she freaked out so much she fainted. Diana is from Carlsbad, San Diego. She actually worked as a firearms instructor, and she was prepared to use her expertise for bad. She plotted to take out her ex-husband. This was a guy named Greg Mulliville. The reason why she wanted to do this was because they had a terrible divorce. Thankfully, Greg did survive the attempt, but Diana was sentenced to 26 years to life behind bars. Even though her ex-husband did survive, this does not mean that it's okay for her to conspire to do this in the first place. It could have easily gone the other way and Greg could have lost his life. When the judge read this out, Diana was stunned. She literally fainted and a cop and her lawyer had to check on her. She was then taken out of court and to prison in a stretcher. Now, do you think she was hamming this up a bit to seem like a victim? Or do you think she was genuinely that surprised that she was facing life in prison? MITCHELLE BLAIR. I don't care how much of a tough guy you think you are, this woman is scary. She was a mother of 4 children, but she sadly took out 2 of them. This includes her 9-year-old named Steven and her 13-year-old named Stony. The cops actually found their bodies in a freezer, which is really messed up. Now, unsurprisingly, she was sentenced to life behind bars with no parole. This means no matter how good her behavior is in prison, she will never be getting out. In court, she freaked out many times at the judge.
Everybody wanna know, yes I did kill her!
She also screamed about exactly why she did what she did. She said that her daughter had been mean to her other kids. But the court found 0 evidence of that. And throughout her very public trial, she had to be kicked out of court many times.
You get your shit. You know we had to beg you. Me, Steven, all of us used to cry for you.
You're not gonna be able to stay by your rules.
And
Rude rich girl. In 2013, a rich girl named Penelope Soto was arrested. That is because she had some illegal substances with her. During her bond hearing, she kept laughing at the judge. She also told the judge, who's of Cuban descent, adios as she walked off.
Bye-bye.
And that's when the judge, Rodriguez Shomat, called her back to the stand. He then doubled her bond amount. The girl then angrily replied, saying F you, and she also flipped him the bird.
Count one would be 10,000.
Are you serious?
I am serious. Adios.
And that's when the judge decided to turn off his chill mode. Judge Chomat sentenced her to 30 days imprisonment for contempt of court, and then said adios right back to her.
Come back again. Come back again. Bring him back again. I believe I heard you saying to... I believe you... Did you say... Did you say that?
Yes, sir.
Oh, you did say that? I find you in direct criminal contempt. 30 days in the county.
Now, that is pretty savage and a good way to deal with a rude, rich girl. However, she did later apologize and the judge let her off. He simply urged her to seek some counseling. But just seeing Penelope's reaction here is pretty priceless. KY'ANDREA Cook. KY'ANDREA had engaged in a plot to steal some money from someone. She got talking to someone on a dating app, but she was not interested in a date. Instead, her and her boyfriend carjacked the guy. But this went wrong and the person on the other end of the Tinder date ended up getting shot. At the time, she had just turned 18, meaning she could be tried as an adult. and the judge decided that because of what she did was so severe, she was sentenced to 20 years behind bars. When this was read out, her mother, who was in court, began screaming and crying. She was really losing it and then had to be removed by some cops. KY'ANDREA then got really sad herself and began crying and screaming. I can't feel too bad for KY'ANDREA as she did get someone shot. But I really do feel bad for her mother because she had nothing to do with this. Just imagine how bad you would feel if your kid was facing 20 years behind bars. Screamer. This one comes from Judge Rodriguez Showmat that we saw before, and it was yet another viral clip which he featured in. This one is called the Miami Screamer, but this one's a lot more serious than the substance charge from before. This woman was arrested for taking out her husband. She met with the judge during her bail hearing in 2013. She applied for a bond, but the judge said no. And when she was denied, she realized she would likely be spending the rest of her days in a prison cell. And that's when she freaked out and had this reaction. As you can hear, she screams that she simply had to do what she did because of self-defense. She even says her husband broke her leg. I'm not sure whether she's telling the truth or not, but her reaction is intense. TATIANA FUSARI. This one involves a 27-year-old woman named Tatiana and her husband. Both her and her husband Seth Welch were charged with taking a life. That's because their own daughter passed away because of a lack of food and water. When they saw their child was starving, they didn't seek any medical help. They said they didn't do this because of religious reasons, but I don't know any religion that says don't seek medical help. When they heard their charge, they had a very intense reaction. Seth's jaw drops and Tatiana begins crying.
It requires a DNA sample to be taken upon arrest, which is often like a cotton swab or in the inside of your cheek. They're talking about this Mary Welch. It is a felony, possible penalty of up to life imprisonment or any term of years.
They will be spending the rest of their lives in jail. But is this called for, seeing as they did let their daughter pass away? Alexandria Thomas. This is another mother-daughter freakout in court. It took place at the Palm Beach County Jail in Florida. She had used a blade and injured her boyfriend outside a supermarket in Florida. She was arrested and did not know how he was doing. But that's when the judge told her in court that her boyfriend was in a medically induced coma, and he likely was not gonna make it. That was when she realized how serious what she'd done was. Her mother began to freak out, and then she began freaking out as well.
Alexandria Thomas.
Her mother was later recorded outside the courtroom shaking and crying. Erica Mae Butts and SHANITA Larice Cunningham. This is a double freakout in court. They'd both injured a toddler named Serenity Richardson, and this led to the toddler passing away. Erica was actually the godmother of the child, and her and her girlfriend SHANITA began to really injure this kid. The girl was sadly only 3 years old, so she couldn't defend herself. They both said in court that they didn't think they would take the toddler's life, but they did and were thus sentenced to life behind bars. When their sentences were read out, they freaked out in court. They were crying and screaming, and then they both collapsed onto the floor. Erica's mum then begins screaming and crying, and she has to be removed from court. They're then both removed from the court in wheelie chairs. And it's probably the most intense thing you're gonna see all day. Regina Johnson. Regina took the life of her husband and her daughter. This took place in 2012, and she was sentenced to 80 years behind bars. Considering she was already in her 50s, this means she'll spend the rest of her days in a cell. After doing what she did, she stayed with the bodies for 3 days. Regina went totally crazy, like something out of a movie. She'd written on a mirror with red lipstick, "This is all your fault." Now, Regina's version of the events were quite different. She said that her husband had taken her daughter's life, and then in self-defense, she'd taken her husband's life. But the court did not believe this, and they found she was guilty of taking both lives. When she was sentenced, she got very angry. She said there's no way to prove it.
They never proved anything. Nobody ever said, they never even had a motive. Why? How can you sit there
and she also said, "I have no respect for you as a judge."
When I shot him because he shot my daughter. She's not fair. What kind of judge is that? I have no respect for you.
Jody Herring. Jody Herring had her daughter taken away from her by a social worker. She was so angry about this that she took the life of that social worker. As she was leaving work, Laura Sobel was taken out by Herring. Herring then went on to take out 3 of her own relatives. She basically went on an insane rampage. She wanted revenge because she'd had her daughter taken away from her. Now, she tried to plead insanity, hoping she wouldn't go to prison. In court, she was crying and saying she was sorry.
I can't take back that day. I wish I could, but I can't. I handle my stress so differently than anybody else does, and I wish I could help myself. I really could. I asked for help several times.
Laura Sobel's sister said she does not deserve a day of liberty. Do you agree with this? Whether you do or don't, the judge definitely did and sentenced her to life behind bars. But now it's time for you to make your voice heard. Do you agree with people getting life sentences? Some say it's fair while others say it's too long. Vote in the poll in the top right corner and let me know. If you want some more amazing videos, then check out my second channel. But as always, thanks for watching. There's some more videos on screen right now. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.